What's going on, folks? This is Chip Avenger with Fight Breakdown. I'm going to give you my thoughts and predictions on this upcoming UFC Vegas 31 card. We have Islam Makhachev versus Thiago Moises in the main event. Should be a good card. It should be fun. I'm going to kind of speed run this time. I don't have as much time this week to really go in deep dives on all these fights like I did more of last week. But I will give you my thoughts on these fights on this card and tell you who I would play in Draftkings and who I would stay away from in Draftkings. Last week I went 11 out of 12 for my fight predictions. There were 12 fights on that card, and I predicted 11 of them correctly, and also told you to stay away from a couple of the winners on Draftkings because they wouldn't score well, and that was true. That's exactly what happened. Specifically with Jennifer Maia and Brad Tavares. So let's get into this one. First fight of the night, we have Alan Baudot versus Rodrigo Nascimento. Baudot is 8-2 overall. Nascimento is 8-1 overall. Nascimento is a minus 340 betting favorite. He is 9,000 on DraftKings. Baudot is a plus 270 and 7,200 on DraftKings. Baudot has one fight in the UFC. He got knocked out in that fight quickly. Nascimento has two fights in the UFC. He has a sub finish and a knockout loss where he also got knocked out quickly. In this fight, I'm going to go with Nascimento. I think he overall is the better fighter. I think he's physically more talented, and I think the betting line shows that. So that's why the betting line is minus 340. So give me a Nascimento on this one. I also think he'd probably be a good play in DraftKings because there's a decent chance he gets a finish over Baudot. So moving on to the next one, Francisco Figueiredo versus Malcolm Gordon. Figueiredo is 12-3-1 overall, and Malcolm Gordon is 12-5 overall. Gordon is 0-2 in the UFC with 2 quick losses. Figueiredo is 1-0 in the UFC. Figueiredo is minus 310 favorite. Malcolm Gordon is plus 250 on the comeback. Figueiredo is 8,900 on DraftKings, and Gordon is 7,300 on DraftKings. I like Figueiredo here. Figueiredo wins this fight. I'm not a huge fan of Malcolm Gordon and his overall ability and skill set. So I do think Figueiredo gets this win. It's probably a good play on DraftKings. He probably gets a finish in this fight. So if you can work him into your lineups, he's probably a good play at $8,900. Next fight, Miles Johns versus Anderson dos Santos. Johns is 11-1 overall. Dos Santos is 21-8 overall. Johns is minus 175, and Dos Santos is plus 150. I like Miles Johns in this fight, guys. On DraftKings, you have Miles Johns. Let's see if I can find it here. Anderson dos Santos, there he is. Miles Johns is 8,400 and Anderson dos Santos is 7,800. I like Miles Johns to win this fight. He may score okay. He's at a price range that is one that you're going to need to find fighters in that kind of low to mid 8,000s. He's averaged 72 points per his 2 UFC wins. So not a great scorer, to be honest with you. So he's a guy that I think he's probably going to win this fight. I don't know if he's going to score well. It's possible, but he may be someone you might have to take a flyer on just because he's in that range of price that you're going to need to take some fighters on. So I do have Miles Johns to win this fight. Don't love him on DraftKings, but you may have to take him in a couple of your lineups. All right, next fight, Khalid Taha versus Sergey Morozov. Taha's 13-3, Morozov 16-4 overall. Taha is minus 165, and Morozov is plus 140. On DraftKings, Taha is 8,300, and Morozov is 7,900. This is my first underdog pick of the night, guys. I like Morozov in this fight. He only has one fight in the UFC. That was a loss. Taha hasn't been impressive in the UFC either. I think Morozov wins this fight. I think he's a good play on DraftKings. I would have him on some of my lineups. And again, as with any underdog pick, if you're playing multiple lineups, don't have him in all your lineups. But I think Morozov can get it done here. And he's in that price range, $7,900. That's you know you're getting closer, kind of closer to toss ups. But obviously he's not a toss up. Taha is a minus 165 favorite, but I like Morozov in that one. Moving on, Amanda Lemos versus Montserrat Conejo. Lemos is 9-1-1. Conejo is 10-1 overall. Lemos is a huge minus 500 favorite, and Conejo comes back at plus 380. Yeah, this is one of those ones when I looked at this card originally, I absolutely love Lemos in this spot. She's much bigger, taller fighter than Conejo. She has really good takedown defense, and she has really good striking. She's a powerful striker. Montserrat is just okay. She doesn't have good striking. She's gonna need to get this fight to the ground. She's a much smaller fighter, and she's not gonna be able to take Lemos down. This fight heavily favors Lemos. Lemos's one loss was fighting on short notice, up a couple weight classes against a much larger fighter. Since then, she's at her weight class that she should be at, and she's she's a large she's well sized for the weight class. She's much larger than Conejo, has much more reach. She's gonna piece Conejo up, and I think she gets the finish. So give me Amanda Lemos for the finish. Lemos is $9,300 on DraftKings, so she is pricey, which obviously she's going to be pricey, being a minus 500 favorite. But if you can get her in some of your lineups, I think she's worth it. I think she's probably going to get to finish Conejo. All right, moving on to the next one. We have Daniel Rodriguez, D-Rod versus Preston Parsons. Rodriguez is 14-2 overall. Parsons is 9-2 overall. Rodriguez is minus 270. Parsons is plus 220 overall in this fight. So this is kind of interesting because, let me give you DraftKings prices for these guys first. So what's interesting about this fight to me is that you would think that Daniel Rodriguez would be more expensive than he is, and you would think that he'd be a bigger favorite, but he's not. So Daniel Rodriguez is 8,800 on DraftKings. Preston Parsons is 7,400, which that's a pretty big favorite. But Parsons is a short notice replacement, and Daniel Rodriguez is a UFC veteran with some really good wins over some good opponents. And I like Daniel Rodriguez a lot. But when you look at Parsons, he has a lot of finishes, man. He does have a loss to Mike Perry, but that was way back in 2015. Every one of his other fights, every other win is by finish. With that said, I still like Daniel Rodriguez. I think coming on short notice against a guy as tough as Daniel Rodriguez, Rodriguez has good takedown defense. So it looks like Parsons is a guy who's going to want to get this to the ground because he has a lot of finishes by submission. Of his wins, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of them are by submission, so he's going to want to get Daniel Rodriguez to the ground, and that's easier said than done. Rodriguez has really good takedown defense. He's strong, and I think Rodriguez knocks out Parsons. So I like Rodriguez in this fight. Short notice fighter. Sometimes I like taking them because your other fighter hasn't been preparing for that kind of a matchup. The problem is that Daniel Rodriguez was preparing for Nurmagomedov, who was going to want to take Rodriguez to the ground, and so as far as preparation for Rodriguez, he's fighting a similar fighter. He's fighting a guy who's not going to want to stand with him. He's going to want to take him to the ground. So I'm sure Rodriguez has been working his takedown defense a lot in this fight camp. So give me Rodriguez by knockout. I think he gets it done and scores well on DraftKings. So Now we're into the main card, guys. We have Gabriel Benitez versus Billy Quarantillo. Benitez is 29 or 22 and 9 overall. Quarantillo is 15 and 3 overall. Benitez is minus 175 favorite. Billy Q is plus 150 on the comeback. On Draftkings, Benitez is 8,500 and Billy Q is 7,700. This is kind of my second actual upset pick of the night, guys. I like Billy Q in this fight. Again, this is kind of in that range. He's $7,700, so you see upsets in this range. Billy Q is 3-1 in his UFC career, and he averages 108 points per win. Benitez is up and down in his UFC career. He's a good fighter. I could maybe see him being the favorite in this fight. I think he's probably a little more of a favorite than he should be, to be honest with you. But in his UFC career, let's see. Overall, he has gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 and 4 overall. But if you look at his competition, he hasn't been fighting the best guys, and when he's kind of stepped up to better competition in the UFC, he's lost. Sodiq Yusuff, Omar Morales, Andre Fili. So this is one of those things where I think it's, Billy Quarantillo is not Justin James. He's a better fighter than Justin James. I think Billy Q wins this fight. I like Billy Q in this fight, and he's worth the play on DraftKings at $7,700. Billy Q is tough. He's well-rounded, and he's ran off a pretty good streak here before losing a decision to Gavin Tucker in his last fight. I don't think Benitez is going to be able to quite do what Gavin Tucker did to Billy Q in the wrestling department. So, give me Billy Q for this fight. Moving on to the next one. Rodolfo Vieira versus Dustin Stoltzfus. Vieira is 7-1 overall. Stoltzfus is 13-2. Vieira is minus 230 favorite. Stoltzfus is plus 190. On DraftKings, Vieira is 8,700. Stoltzfus is 7,500. This is an interesting fight because I think it could go either way. Vieira is a world champion jiu-jitsu player. He's incredible on the ground, and he is a mountain of muscle. Very physically strong. Stoltzfus is a good, well-rounded fighter overall. I think Stoltzfus is going to have a striking advantage in this fight. He's going to have a reach advantage in this fight. Vieira is absolutely going to want to come after Stoltzfus and get this to the ground. Stoltzfus has a good grappling game. Most of his fights are by submission, or most of his wins are by submission. The problem here is that Vieira is just a better jiu-jitsu player. So Stoltzfus does have a experience advantage overall in MMA over Vieira. Vieira only has 8 pro fights. Stoltzfus has 15. So he almost has twice as many pro fights. And then in Vieira's last fight against Fluffy Hernandez, he gassed out badly. Hernandez came in on short notice, and Vieira should have taken him out of there, and Vieira gassed out, absolutely gassed out, to the point where he couldn't hardly hold his arms up, to the point that Fluffy Hernandez submitted Vieira, a world-class grappler. That's my concern with Vieira. Dustin Stoltzfus is solid, man. He's a solid fighter, and he has a good ground game. If Stoltzfus makes Vieira work really hard and he gasses out again, Stoltzfus can win this fight. So I have Stoltzfus in some of my lineups because if he wins, it's probably going to be because Vieira gassed out and he finished him. And if he can't get Stoltzfus to the ground as this fight continues and gets into maybe the third round and Vieira gasses out, then Stoltzfus can finish him. But overall, I'm gotta go with Vieira overall. I have Vieira in more of my lineups than I do Stoltzfus just because he's so good on the ground. I mean, and he's a jiu-jitsu wizard, and he's extremely strong. So if he gets you on the ground and gets on top of you, you're in bad shape. So lean towards Vieira, but this is one of those fights where you have a significant favorite that I think there's absolutely a legitimate path to victory for your underdog. So Stoltzfus isn't a bad play as an underdog. Moving on to the next fight, Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens at 28-18, fighting Matuis Gamrot at 18-1. Gamrot minus 220 and Stevens is plus 180. On Draftkings, Gamrot is $8,600. Stevens is $7,600. This is another one of those fights. Stevens has been under a rough patch. Um, he's on a losing streak in the UFC, but Stevens is really tough. He hits hard, and he's a veteran. He's fought in the UFC for a very long time, and he's a guy that he could pull this fight out. Matuis Gamrot's a really good fighter, but he only has one fight in the UFC, so that's my concerns here. I would lean towards Gamrot in this fight, but this fight's kind of like the last one, like the Vieira Stoltzfus fight. I think Gamrot wins this fight more times than he loses this fight. If they fought 10 times, Gamrot probably wins it 6 or 7 times. But Stevens has power. He's a veteran. He's tough. Stevens could knock out Gamrot. He absolutely could. And if Stevens does win this fight, it's probably going to be by knockout, because that's how Stevens usually wins his fights, when he wins. So this fight, I'm going to lean towards Gamrot again, like I lean towards Vieira, but it's worth playing Stevens in some of your lineups as well. And you can maybe do something where, like, in one lineup you have Stevens and Vieira, and the other lineup you have Stoltzfus and Gamrot, just to kind of hedge your bets there a little bit in your lineups. But you could play around with that a little bit. But another underdog, a decent, sizable underdog that has a legitimate path to victory. But overall, I take Gamrot. He's probably going to control this fight. He's probably going to win this fight. But man, Stevens has power, and he's tough, and he's a veteran, and he could absolutely get this done. So, all right, next fight, co-main event of the night: Marion Reneau versus Miesha Tate. Reneau 9-7-1 overall. Miesha Tate 18-7 overall. Tate's a minus 130 favorite. Reneau is a plus 110 underdog. They are 8,200 and 8,000 on DraftKings. Miesha Tate hasn't fought in a long time. I think it's 2016 maybe. She hasn't fought. So it's been like 5 years since Tate's fought. Reneau is 44 years old, so it's kind of like one of those things where you have a red flag on each side, a significant red flag on each side. Tate's a better fighter. Tate's absolutely a better fighter than Marion Reneau. She hasn't fought in a long time, but she's a more skilled fighter, and she's a lot younger. She's still a lot younger than Reneau. Reneau's 44 years old, and Reneau's 9-7 overall. She's she's 3-6-1 in her UFC career. Tate's the better fighter. She should win this fight. She's averaged 73 points per UFC win across 6 wins. I do think she wins this fight, and she may not score great in a win. She's probably going to win by decision. So, but she's at $8,200. She might be someone you have in some of your lineups just because it's going to be a cheap play, and I do like her a lot in this fight. I think the line is at minus 130 is that low for Tate because she hasn't fought in so long, so there's some question marks there. So, but I do like Tate in this fight. She's a better fighter. All right, moving on to the main event: Islam versus Thiago Moises. Islam's 19-1. Moises is 15-4. Islam's the biggest betting favorite on this card at minus 650. I mean, he's a huge favorite. Moises is plus 475 on the comeback. In DraftKings, Islam is 9,400 and Moises is 6,800. This is one of those fights where, the betting line is essentially accurate. I mean, it's the main event, but this is a showcase fight for Islam. He's a guy that could be champion in this weight class. Islam's a monster, guys. He's an American top team guy. He's a guy that those guys at ATT say is I've heard them say that he's better than Habib on the ground, which is, I mean, it's kind of unimaginable. But if he's close to as good as Habib on the ground, I think he's actually a better striker than Habib. I mean, he could take over this lightweight division at some point here. This is a showcase fight for him. He's going to beat Taha Moises, and in a 5-round main event, he's going to have probably significant control time. He's probably going to get a finish. He has 5 rounds to get a finish here. I think he's going to score really well. If you can get him in a lineup or 2 or 3, it's probably a good play to get him in. Both our 2 biggest favorites in this card, Amanda Lemos and Islam, they're both good plays on DraftKings. I think they both score well. If you can get Islam in your lineups, get him in your lineup. He's very, very likely to win this fight, and he's very likely to finish this fight and score really well. Even if he doesn't get a finish, if he goes 5 rounds, he's going to have a ton of control time, guys, and he's going to score really well either way. So give me Islam. All right, guys, that is the breakdown of this fight card. No, it was shorter, pretty short. I didn't go in depth in the fights, into the fights. I apologize for that. Try to get a little more in depth next week, but I wanted to give you my thoughts on this card and who I would take in DraftKings and who I would maybe stay away from, and who I think the underdogs who have a significant, legitimate path to victory are. All right, guys, so please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment if you want. I'll be happy to respond to you guys, and good luck this week.